Polk was perhaps best known for his work ethic. According to legend, only 42 of 1,460 days in office were spent away from his desk. On several occasions, he would work himself to the point of exhaustion and illness for the sake of his nation, something he prided himself on. The inauguration of Zachary Taylor, Polk's own former general, came as a relief to the thoroughly aged 53-year-old, now former president. "Now then, I am a private citizen. I am relieved by all," he wrote in a letter while visiting New Orleans, after recovering from a bout with cholera that was contracted during his long journey back to Nashville. James and Sarah purchased an estate now creatively known as the Polk Place in Nashville, where they planned to live out the rest of their days. Polk had become one of the youngest ex-presidents in American history. He would not live long enough to enjoy it. The cholera returned, and the withered former president would not survive it. James K. Polk would die just 103 days after leaving office on June 15, 1849. He was originally buried in a mass grave for victims of the cholera epidemic, but then was moved to a grave constructed in the front lawn of the Polk Place. Sarah Polk would wear black in mourning for her departed husband until her own death in 1891. President Polk's corpse was moved once more to be buried with his wife. The Polks now reside in a grave on the northeast lawn of the Tennessee state capitol. A good question to be raised is, why is Polk not more widely remembered among the American populace? He was the president who presided over the acquisition of what are now our nation's two largest states. When historians conduct polls among themselves to determine the greatest American presidents, he usually cracks the top 10. Historians also concur that he was the last strong president before the American Civil War. However, many believe the conflict was Polk's legacy. Division between North and South grew during the Polk presidency, and the debate over the spread of slavery was born out of Polk's expansion. Bancroft and Sarah Polk would wage a publicity campaign in the 1880s to combat these accusations. Though Polk has so many accomplishments and so many controversial actions, American schoolchildren only hear the name James K. Polk when memorizing the presidents and studying their usually single chapter on the Mexican-American War. Opinions on the Polk presidency are more contrasting than most American presidents. Some see him as a man who conducted the worst and most blatant land grab in American history, an armed robber-in-chief, and a slaver. Others see him as a humble man who played an important role in the creation of the greatest nation the world has ever seen. Polk added 1.2 million square acres to the United States in just 4 years. Some say dwarfing Jefferson's Louisiana Purchase. Both sides of the debate, however, agree on one thing about Mr. Polk that sets him apart from most every American politician before or since. He did keep his campaign promises, and he succeeded in the goals that he at least supposedly set for himself. Romney and Polk already have some somewhat trivial similarities that probably have little to do with policy. They both have deeply held religious convictions. Neither man drinks because of his religious convictions. Both are former governors. Both of them have lost or will lose the vote in the state that elected them governor. Both were involved in diplomacy with the British. Of course, Polk did so with much better results. Both of them first met their wife when they were very young and in school, but didn't marry them, said wife, until after college. Both are lawyers. Mitt Romney graduated from Harvard Law School. James K. Polk practiced law before his election to the Tennessee House. Both had to fight tough battles for their party's presidential nominations. Both were political conservatives who believed strongly in what we would now call American exceptionalism, a belief that many would tie to Polk's own ideal of manifest destiny. Polk, just like many modern Republicans, was fearful of what him and they consider to be activist judges who interfere with laws passed by elected officials. At one point in his political career, Polk supported elections for all justices. But when Romney said his presidential role model was James K. Polk, he was not referring to any of these insignificant comparisons. Perhaps he was getting at this. Though personally unlikable, Polk was elected president and maintained a fairly high approval rating. This is a trait that Governor Romney would certainly like to share. Though many would deny that he truly followed his own words, Polk spoke on several occasions about his intent to honor the integrity of the Constitution and limit the power of Washington, part of Mitt Romney's platform. Republican strategist and former Bush advisor Karl Rove perhaps explained the comparison the best. The one key point that Mr. Romney would like to share with Mr. Polk. He, meaning Romney, will be like James Polk, is one of the near greats, and we've begun to recognize him in recent years, but here's a guy who ran, and he said he was going to do 4 things. Rove was referring to that one anecdote. It's a little funny how one political anecdote that may or may not be true has lasted the test of time. It's a legend, because it's what we all want to expect from our politicians. But it's a little sad that Americans need to look back a quarter millennia to find a president who lived up to expectations, who did what he wanted to do and was successful in what he wanted to do and what he promised to do.